We have also completed or discussed about the bunodont, lophodont, and I have also shown you the picture of this one. Now come to the celenodont. So in case of celenodont, the cusps are crescentic, as in sheep, cow, that is seleno. The cusps are crescentic, that means half C-like structure. Then come to the cecodont. Generally, in case of them, the cusps have sharp cutting surfaces, as in carnivores, that is dog. So that is celenodont. So this is all about the cusp pattern. Again, my dear student, I want to say one thing. Sometimes what happens in case of the jaw or in the jaw, one or more than teeth, that means one or more than one tooth are lacking, they are not present in that position of a jaw. So this condition is called as diastema. Okay, so this is also a short question. So what do you mean by diastema? Diastema. So this is a condition where absence of one or more type of teeth leaves a gap between the rows of teeth. Such natural gap is called diastema. That means if one jaw is lacking a particular tooth or teeth, that condition is known as diastema. Okay. So this is all about the dentition. So now come to last part of this one, that is known as dental formula. So that is known as dental formula. So what I am telling, for example, this is the upper jaw and this is the lower jaw. You see the picture, this is the upper jaw. So for example, this is my upper jaw and this is my lower jaw, and we are bilateral symmetrical. So this half is exactly similar to this part. So now consider the case of this part. So this jaw. So in this jaw a number of teeth are present, and as these are heterodont, different type of tooth present. Okay, that means different type of teeth are present there. So if I consider the case of or count the number of teeth present in upper jaw and lower jaw, and this is known as a representation of number of the teeth present on upper jaw, half of the upper jaw and half of the lower jaw is denoted as dental formula. So what is the definition? The number of teeth in half of the upper jaw and lower jaw of the same side is denoted in a numerical expression, and this is known as dental formula. The total number of teeth in dental formula multiplied by 2 gives the total number of teeth. For example, in this case, so you see this is the incisor, then this is the canine, this is the premolar, and this is the molar. Oh, you see. So I can write here, for example, incisor 2 by 2, that means upper jaw having 2, lower jaw having 2, canine for 1, 1, this is for example 2 and lower in 2, and this is for example 3 and this is for example 3, for example. So this is the teeth present on the upper jaw, this is the teeth of the lower jaw, and this is half. So you just count this one, 2 plus 1 3, 3 plus 2 it is 5, 3 is equal to 8, and this is also 8, and totally in this position 16 number of teeth present. So if it is multiplied by 2, then in this animal 32 number of teeth present. So this represents the dental formula. Okay. So dental formula is the representation of the teeth present on half of the lower jaw and upper jaw. Okay. So if it is multiplied by 2, then total number of teeth comes of that mammal. Okay. So this is all about the what? The tooth. So till now I discussed all about the first part of the alimentary canal, that is the mouth and buccal cavity. Okay. So immediately the mouth follows to buccal cavity poses this type of derivatives, then the buccal cavity continues to another part of the alimentary canal that I shall discuss now. So this is the pharynx. Okay. So we shall discuss about the pharynx. So what is pharynx? So pharynx is a part which is very important in alimentary canal. So the part of the alimentary canal immediately behind the buccal cavity is known as pharynx, and this is pharynx. So the part of the alimentary canal now I shall discuss is the pharynx. So this is pharynx, the most important part, and again we shall discuss the pharynx of different animals or different tetrapods, so that this will become a comparative study. So, the part of the alimentary canal immediately behind the buccal cavity is the pharynx lined with endoderm. So, the pharynx is lined with what? Endoderm. It is common passage. It is common passage serving both for digestion and the respiration. Okay. So, you just think yourself. So, whenever you are taking food material, it is entering the buccal cavity. At the same time, the nasal chamber is also what? Carrying the what? Air or oxygen, and they are generally meeting at one point, and that point is the pharynx. Okay. So, it is a common passage serving both for the digestion and for respiration. And thirdly, as a part of the digestive system, it is used as a passage for food from the buccal cavity to the oesophagus, and its muscles initiate swallowing. That means just after the pharynx, there is the next part of the buccal cavity, that is called as oesophagus, and the pharynx has some muscles. They actually initiate the process of swallowing. So, if this pharynx will be not there, that means pharynx is not there, then we cannot swallow the food material. Okay. So, the pharynx also helps in swallowing the food material. So, now we see in case of fishes. So, as this is a comparative anatomy class, so I can again say in case of fishes, the pharynx is large and laterally perforated by gill slits. Okay. While in tetrapod it is short and bears opening of the nostril. So, in case of the aquatic animals, the pharynx actually possesses the gills laterally. So, for you see, just you see, for example, this is a fish. So, for example, you see this is a fish, and in case of fish, this is operculum, and this part actually is the pharyngeal region. So, they possess actually what? This is the pharyngeal region. So, this is the mouth, or this is the buccal cavity, and this is pharynx, and these pharynx are perforated. Okay. So, they are helpful for aquatic respiration, and hence this is large, the pharynx is very large, this is the pharyngeal region. But in case of tetrapod, which are terrestrial, as they have a short, that means their pharynx is very short, because there is not presence of gill. They have the modified structure for respiration. So, in fishes, the pharynx is large and laterally perforated for the gill slits, while in tetrapods it is short and bears the opening of the nostril. In embryos, for example, you consider the case of the embryos. In embryos, the wall of the pharynx gives off a number of evaginations which develop into the spiracles, then gill slits or gill clefts, air bladder, lungs, tonsil, and few endocrine glands, that is thymus, thyroid and parathyroid. That means I want to say that if this is, for example, in my first class I have shown you, for example, this is the embryo, and you see this is the actually the god, and this is the god. So, now this god actually gives rise to a number of structure. That means the most important part is the pharynx, and in case of the embryo, this pharyngeal region give rise to a number of structures. They are the gill clefts, they are the spiracle, they are the air bladder, they are the endocrine glands like thymus, thyroid and parathyroids. So, the pharynx is very important from its embryological point of view and also in case of the adult. So, now come to the next part, that is the oesophagus. So, pharynx has no role. This is a simple passage for passing food material into the alimentary canal, first one. Secondly, helps in respiration. So, now come to the most important part of the alimentary canal, that is known as oesophagus. Okay. Let us discuss on this. So, the pharynx leads to oesophagus. So, oesophagus is short, thick, muscular tube in cartilaginous fish. So, first of all we shall discuss the oesophagus of fish, and again in fish the cartilaginous fish comes first. So, in case of cartilaginous fish, or in case of scoliodon, in case of elasmobranch, or in case of salachi, different names. So, in them the oesophagus is very short, this is very thick walled and muscular. Okay. In them the longitudinal folds converge into a crescentic fold called oesophageal sphincter, which serves as a valve between the oesophagus and the stomach. Okay. In them what happens? The longitudinal folds converge. So for example, you see, for example, this is the oesophagus, okay. So this is oesophagus, and this oesophagus has some longitudinal. So this is the longitudinal. So the oesophagus has some longitudinal folds and they converge to A. So these longitudinal folds converge at this point, and in this point they form a sphincter like structure. So this sphincter actually regulate the opening to the stomach, because this is the oesophagus and oesophagus follows to another part that is called as stomach. So in between the stomach and oesophagus there is present a sphincter or valve that actually regulate the passing of food material or passage of food material from the oesophagus to the what? Stomach. So in case of cartilaginous fish, what happens? Longitudinal folds converge into a crescentic, that is crescentric fold, that is called as oesophageal sphincter, this one. So this is the oesophageal sphincter. So this is the oesophageal sphincter that actually serves as a valve between the oesophagus and the stomach. So this is all about the cartilaginous fish. But in case of bony fish, what happens? In bony fishes, it is a short tube with its internal lining raised to 7 prominent longitudinal folds. How much? 7 folds. So for example, this is a tube. So the internal lining will raise to 7 number of folds. So you see, just for example, this is the TS, transverse section. So internal lining, so this is 1 fold, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, this is 5, this is 6, and this is for example 7. So these are the internal line. So this is the internal lining and these are the longitudinal folds. So in bony fishes, the oesophagus is short with its internal lining raised to 7 prominent longitudinal folds. Number 1. Secondly, taste buds are embedded in the mucosa, and there are large deeply sunk mucus secreting glands opening to the lumen of the oesophagus in case of this bony fishes. Okay. So now come to the next one. In bony fishes, the most important character is that a pneumatic duct. So if this is the, you see, if this is the, for example, in case of the bony fishes, so this is the picture of the what cartilaginous fish. I am now again giving just idea about the bony fishes. For example, this is the bony oesophagus of the bony fishes. I have told you that. So these are the longitudinal what? The longitudinal muscles, and this is for example the stomach. So now in case of bony fishes, what happens? A pneumatic duct arises from the oesophagus and connect with the air bladder. So this is the oesophagus. So from that one duct arises, and this duct is known as pneumatic duct. So I shall show in detail in picture. So this is the pneumatic duct. So this pneumatic duct actually forms a structure that is known as air bladder. So this is the air bladder. You see, this is the air bladder, and this is the stomach, and this is the oesophagus. So this is the oesophagus, this is the stomach, and sidely it develops a structure that is the air bladder. So this air bladder actually develop from one structure that is known as pneumatic duct, and this duct comes from the oesophagus. So in case of bony fishes, a pneumatic duct arises from the oesophagus and connect to the air bladder. Folds of, again in them, folds of the oesophagus converge behind to form an oesophageal sphincter just like the cartilaginous fishes and prevent the entry of water of the respiratory system into the intestinal bulb, the most important feature in them. Then this is all about the fishes. Then come to the frog, or then come to the amphibians. In case of amphibians, what happens? In frogs and newts, the oesophagus is not very sharply marked from mouth or stomach. Only mucous glands are found in the oesophagus. Okay, this is all about the amphibians. Okay, now come to the reptile. Again, my dear student, you should remember that I am describing the oesophagus in different tetrapods because I am discussing about the anatomical aspect of the oesophagus in this session, okay, in this class. So in reptiles, the oesophagus is longer than fish and amphibia. Longitudinal folds in the oesophagus allow considerable expansion and enable reptiles to swallow large sized prey. Again, in case of reptile, what happens? The longitudinal folds, again if this is the oesophagus, just as you imagine, oesophagus is a tube, and the longitudinal folds of the or in the esophagus allow considerable expansion. So, as the folds are there, then the folds can be expand and provide maximum surface area. So, reptiles can swallow or this type of the muscle or this type of longitudinal muscular arrangement allow or enable this reptile to swallow large prey in comparison to their mouth size. Okay. So, longitudinal folds are very important in case of the reptile. Okay. So, you see this is the, for example, picture of the fish, and here you see this is the pneumatic duct. You just imagine this is the swim bladder and this is the pneumatic duct, and this pneumatic duct, this is the pneumatic duct, and this is the pharynx, and this pneumatic duct actually forms the swim bladder, and you see this is the stomach region. So, this is just one idea regarding the pneumatic duct in case of the fishes. So, now come to the oesophagus in case of the bird. The bird, in case of bird, the oesophagus is very important, it is very important. In birds, the oesophagus is long tube, it is a long tube, because you know the bird has the neck. So, neck means it has the oesophagus, because you see this is my neck. So, this neck covers the oesophagus. So, in birds, the oesophagus is long tube, smooth and longitudinally again folded internally, you see. So, again I am giving one idea regarding the longitudinal fold, you just see. So, for example, this is the inner surface, okay, this is the transverse section of the oesophagus, and you see this is the oesophageal wall, and this is for example lumen. So, this is the lumen, and this is for example wall, okay, esophagus wall. So, internal folding means what I am telling now. So, this is the internal folding. So, this is inner membrane. So, inner membrane is folded. So, this is the folding, okay. So, this is the folding. So, this is the folding. So, due to folding of the inner membrane, what will happen? This will provide maximum surface area. So, this is called as internal folding, okay. So, in birds, oesophagus is a long tube, this is also a long tube, it is smooth and longitudinally. So, this is longitudinally. So, just you see this is the, for example, longitudinal, this is longitudinally. So, idea, so just one idea, this is longitudinally. So, longitudinally they are folded internally. Secondly, oesophagus of birds in contrast to other vertebrates has an outer layer of circular muscles and inner layer of longitudinal muscles. Always what happens in case of other, the inner layer having the circular muscle, outer layer having the what? Longitudinal muscle. But in case of bird what happens? So, in case of oesophagus of the birds what happens? The outer layer consists of, or outer layer contains the circular muscle, and inner layer has the longitudinal muscle, okay. Again, in case of the seed eating birds, and they are also known as graminivorous. In case of graminivorous and carnivorous bird, a portion of the oesophagus is enlarged into a sac like or bag like pouch, that is called as crop. So, this is known as crop. So, this is crop, I shall show you, this is crop. So, in case of bird, the most important feature is in them the oesophagus, that is especially in carnivorous bird and especially in graminivorous or seed eating bird, for example, the pigeon. Pigeons are the seed eating birds. So, in graminivorous and carnivorous birds, a portion of the oesophagus is enlarged. The oesophagus is enlarged. For example, this is the oesophagus and this oesophagus is enlarged here. So, oesophagus is enlarged here and then the stomach will continue. So, this is the enlarged part of the oesophagus. So, what happens? And this becomes a bag like structure, and this is known as crop, and this helps in storing the food material, okay. And again the crop is not responsible in digestion, that means the crop is without the digestive glands. This simply store the food which has eaten quickly by the birds, okay. Then come to the next one. So, in them the what this crop contains in bird, you see this is the picture. So, this is the crop, you see this is the crop, and this crop possesses the glands. So, this is the enlarged crop of this bird, okay. So, now in pigeons what happens? The crop has two, I have shown you the picture, two glands which are cytogenic, two glands which are cytogenic, proliferating fatty acids and discharging them into the lumen of the crop, and this produce pigeon milk. So, you see, so this is the wall of the what? This is the wall of the crop, and this wall or this crop is known as cytogenic. That is, the meaning of this cytogenic means proliferating fatty cells, that means cell they divide or they through mitosis they produce a large number of cells, and these cells are fatty in nature, they produce fat and discharging them, and this fat is discharged into the lumen of the crop. So, this is the lumen. So, lumen of the crop. So, this is discharging the fat substance into the lumen of the crop, and this producing one structure that is known as pigeon milk. So, this is known as pigeon milk. So, what happens whenever this pigeon is taking food material, then this food material is stored in the crop, number one. Secondly, this crop is secreting the fatty substances to that lumen, so that that fatty substance along with the food material becomes a paste-like structure which is known as pigeon milk. So, what is the function of this one? So, now this is taken by the infants of the pigeon. So, infants of the pigeon or pigeons, that means the babies of, that means the birds actually provide this type of substances to its progeny. Okay. So, this is known as, hence this is known as pigeon milk, which is fed to the young. Okay. Now, it is much more nutritive. So, it is examined that, or it is proven that the pigeon milk is highly qualitative, highly nutritive than the mammalian milk. Okay. So, this is all about the oesophagus of the birds. Then come to the mammal. So, in mammal the oesophagus is a long tube. So, this is for example in case of me. So, in case of me, if it is in my case or human case, then in case of human it is around 25 centimeter long. It passes through the diaphragm, because in case of human, in case of mammal, one diaphragm is there. Diaphragm is a transverse partition between the abdomen and the thoracic cavity. So, the oesophagus has to pass through the diaphragm. So, it passes through the diaphragm. The portion below the diaphragm is covered with visceral peritoneum, which is lacking from the upper part. And oesophagus has mucous gland. In case of mammal, this oesophagus has also the mucous gland. They actually secrete the mucus. So, this is the oesophagus. Then come to the what? Then come to the histology of the oesophagus. So, what type of cells are present in case of the oesophagus? That is the histology of the oesophagus. So, number one, we have also studied, or we have also discussed in our first class that the outer wall is always peritoneum. That is the outer wall, or typical, that is the typical structure of the alimentary canal. So, if I explain about or discuss about the histology of the oesophagus, then you know it has the outer layer, that is the peritoneum, and this is also in case of oesophagus, the peritoneum is actually tunica adventitia. Okay. So, in case of what? In case of oesophagus, it has no peritoneum. That means the peritoneum is the typical character of one what? Alimentary canal. But in case of oesophagus, the outermost covering layer is thin. It is thin, and this is known as tunica adventitia. Tunica. So, this is the tunica adventitia. So, this is the outer layer or thin outer layer of the oesophagus, number one. Secondly, the muscle fibers, then it will continue to the muscle fiber towards inner surface. So, the muscle fibers in its anterior part is striped, again point to be noted. So, if this is, for example, if this is the oesophagus, you see this is oesophagus, then this is the anterior part, this is the middle part, and this part is the posterior part, and the posterior part will continue with the stomach. So, now it is observed that different parts of the oesophagus contain different type of muscles. So, what are they? The muscle fibers at its anterior part is striped. So, this possesses striped muscle. See, muscles are striped. Okay. So, striped muscles are there. Then the middle part has both striped and unstriped. Okay. So, here the middle part, both striped and unstriped muscles are there. Okay. And the posterior part has only unstriped muscles. So, this is the posterior part. So, this is unstriped muscles. So, the most important part or most important histology of the oesophagus is outerly the peritoneum is absent, it is replaced by a thin wall that is known as tunica adventitia. Secondly, the muscles which are present, they are again distributed in three different manner. The anteriorly they are striped, middle both striped and unstriped muscles are there in the wall, and lastly or posterior end having only unstriped muscles. But there are exception in ruminants. In case of the ruminants, in case of the cattle actually which are actually grazer in nature. So, but in case of cow, buffalo like that, but there are exception in ruminant mammals, all the muscles are striped or they are voluntary. Okay, this is all about the three layers. Then come to the last layer, the mucosa layer. The mucous membrane lining, that is the oesophagus lining or inner lining of the oesophagus, the mucous membrane lining is made up of stratified squamous epithelial cells in case of the oesophagus. So, these are the histology of the oesophagus. Now, come to the next one, the stomach. So, immediately the oesophagus continues the next part of the alimentary canal, the most important part of the alimentary canal, that is the, for example, this is the oesophagus and oesophagus ends here, then oesophagus continue to a large bag like structure that is known as stomach. So, stomach is the most important part of the alimentary canal, because in one hand this stores the food material and on the other hand this also make the food material what that is a part of the food material is also digested in the stomach. So, this is the stomach. The stomach is the most important part of the alimentary canal. Okay. So, now we shall discuss about the stomach. So, there is no stomach. Again, what I am going to tell, I am telling the stomach of different vertebrates. So, first come to the stomach of cartilaginous fish. Again, this is the cartilaginous fish. Okay. So, in case of cartilaginous fish, stomach is not present. Okay. So, in case of cartilaginous fish, stomach is present, but the stomach is not present in case of the cyclostome, because the first vertebrate is the cyclostome, which is a gnatha. So, I am telling about the gnathostome. In case of the gnathostomata, the stomach is present. So, there is no stomach in case of the cyclostomata, but in case of cartilaginous fish, or it is elasmobranch or selachi, it is a long and wide tube. Okay, this is a long and wide tube thrust on the left side, okay, left side of the abdominal cavity and bend upon itself, forming a J. You see, for example, this is the oesophagus, it is completed. So, now the stomach will form. So, this is the stomach and you see this is the stomach of this one. So, this forms a J like structure. So, this is J. Okay. So, in case of elasmobranch or in case of cartilaginous fish, what happens? This is a long tube thrust on the left side of the abdominal cavity, present towards the abdominal cavity, and bend upon itself, forming a J. First point. Second, the long proximal descending limb is the cardiac part, narrow tubular distal ascending limb is the pyloric part. So, you see this is the descending limb, descending part, and this is the ascending limb, this is the ascending part. So, this part is known as, or the first part is known as cardiac stomach, and the second part and this part is known as the pyloric one, pyloric. So, as this is a J-shaped structure, so the descending part of the J is cardiac and ascending part of the J, this is known as pyloric stomach. Okay. So, the long proximal descending limb is known as cardiac part or cardiac stomach. This is to some extent wider, whereas the narrow tubular distal ending, that is the ascending limb, is known as pyloric part. At the junction of the two parts, what happens? A small outgrowth of cardiac part is present, that is called as blind sac. Again, mucous glands have changed into gastric gland. That means inside the wall there is present mucous glands, and these mucous glands have changed to gastric gland. So, they are known as gastric gland, and gastric gland is secreting acid. In case of them, this gastric gland is secreting acid to kill bacteria and pepsin to digest protein. That means inside inside the wall the mucous gland is there, and that mucous gland is converted to gastric gland, and the gastric gland itself is secreting two juices. The first one, that is the acid, and this acid is dilute hydrochloric acid, and this acid is meant for killing bacteria, that is act as antiseptic agent. And secondly, this is also secreting another enzyme that is known as pepsin. So, pepsin actually digests the food material, whereas that is the acid which actually makes the food material antiseptic. Again, the pepsin which is present in that juice, that is digesting only the protein part of the food material. So, you should remember that pepsin is an enzyme which is actually engaged in, or which is actually responsible for digesting only the protein part of the food material. That means, if the stomach contains the food material, then or when the food material reaches the stomach through the oesophagus, at that time first the gastric gland secrete hydrochloric acid that makes the food material antiseptic. Secondly, the pepsin enzyme only digests the protein part of that food material. On other part of the food material, other constituent of the food material will remain unaffected. This is the function of the gastric gland and gastric juice. So, up to this I covered the stomach of the cartilaginous fish, and we shall continue in the stomach of different vertebrates in next classes. Let us conclude this session for today.